Yeah, all right. So that's the tallest person here. Now stand in the doorway if you would, Moses. All right, see how tall he is compared to that doorway? All right, you can sit down now. um, see that guy there? He's the tallest person in modern history. Imagine this guy like that standing next to that doorway with Moses being maybe a little taller than that woman or the man there, but maybe about as tall as the other guy. I don't know. And I think that's a taller doorway than usual too, but that's a tall guy. He is the tallest man of recent history, born in 1918, and in the Bible, though, there are also tall people, and today we're going to be talking about one of them. Someone who was almost a foot taller than Robert Waddle there. So if you imagine somebody that is so tall that maybe he wouldn't be able to fit under that ceiling there. This guy I'm talking about, well, let's just read about him. First, our lesson today is in Samuel, mostly in chapter 17. But I'm going to start by giving you a verse from chapter 16, verse 7, where it says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, 'Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him.' The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Does how tall you are make you a hero in God's eyes? No? Okay. In today's lesson, we'll see that God looks at the heart to find his heroes. So, 1 Samuel 17, first 3 verses. "Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Socoh in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Dammim between Socoh and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle lines to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with a valley between them." Got a slide with a picture there? So this is a picture of what it looks like today. You can see the valley of Elah here. It's got a creek in it. Philistines were on the hill over there. Saul's camp over here. So the Philistines decided to pick a fight with the Israelites. They wanted to get stuff from them, take their stuff or make them slaves or something like that. So battle lines there, and then, that's good enough. So, you can see there's a creek between the two places. Verse 4, "A champion named Goliath, who was from Gath, came out of the Philistine camp. His height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a bronze helmet on his head and wore a coat of scale armor of bronze, weighing 5,000 shekels. On his legs he wore bronze greaves, and a bronze javelin was slung on his back. His spear shaft was like a weaver's rod, and its iron point weighed 600 shekels. His shield bearer was ahead of him." So this was the Philistine champion. Do you remember how tall it said he was in here?
9 feet.
That's not what it said. What did I read? It said what?
It said 6 cubits and something.
Okay, close. 6. Yeah, 6 cubits and a span. The span happens to be a half of a cubit. This is what a cubit is. You can see how tall a cubit is here. So 6 of those and a half. Okay, so I measured those out on these pieces of tape. And who was it that I asked? David or Daniel? You didn't even come up front. Daniel, I want you to climb this ladder until from that line reaches all the way down to the floor, okay? And we'll see how tall. Okay, so right about there. So that's about how tall this guy was. A little taller than that doorway, wouldn't you say?
Turn around, Daniel, and give us a warrior face.
Yeah, put it, maybe put it on the other side of the thing so that people on that side can see it as well. Okay, so right about there, that's a pretty tall guy. Even a little taller than Moses. So, you can stay up there, please. So, for you kids down here, I forgot I was supposed to do this first. So I have another strap here that's just as long. Let's see how it is when it reaches across you guys to the edge there. How are we doing? So basically, is that it? Does it go all the way across to the edge? Yep. So about as tall, he could lay right across your laps, only I think he'd squish you. All right. Where are we? Second page. All right, so the rest of you guys. Well, he's standing up there. If you want to stand next to this so that you can see how, and then anybody that wants to take a picture can see how they are in height compared to Goliath. Maybe we should have Moses in there too, just so that we can see how a tall man looks compared to Goliath. But if you want anybody that wants to, I mean, that is, and if you don't want your kid in the picture because of whatever, then just let us know. All right, this is it. Okay, so there's Goliath. All right, you can come down now. Thanks. I thought it would also be interesting to think about how big Goliath's feet were. We know that Robert Wadlow's feet, the other guy, were about 1.5 feet long. So they weren't really feet, they were 1.5 feet. But if you figured the same proportions, you would see that Goliath's foot looked something like this. So how does that compare to your foot? It's a little bigger than yours. A little bigger than hers, too.
That's where Bigfoot comes from.
I think this is bigger than Bigfoot. Yeah. So that's a pretty good sized foot. Now, imagine if he stepped on you. You guys would be mincemeat if he stepped on you. If he stepped on me, I'd be dead, for sure. Probably weighed someplace in the neighborhood of 600-800, who knows. He probably wasn't he was a warrior. It says he was a warrior, experienced warrior, so he wasn't some skinny guy like me or Moses or Wadlow. He was a good-sized guy.
I wonder if when he walked, the ground shaked.
Well, I guess it depended on the ground, huh? So, anyway, one more thing about him that you might want to think about. It said in there that he had a spear, size of a weaver's rod, whatever that is, but the tip of the spear, just the iron tip of the spear, weighed as much as, who's going to volunteer here? You come up here. Okay. put that. Okay, so the two of those put together, that's how much that weighed. How'd you like to have a spear that the tip was way out here and you're trying to hold it with that much weight on it? He must have been a pretty strong. She doesn't even want to hold it now. All right, you can put it down. So you get the idea that this guy was pretty powerful.
Is that like 15 pounds?
15 pounds about. Yeah, I took a little water out of the top, so it'd be. A jug of water is usually 8 pounds. So, back to 1 Samuel 17:8. Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, "Why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we'll all become your subjects. But if I overcome and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistine said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man and let us fight each other." What do you think, Moses? You want to take on somebody that tall? Wouldn't take much, especially with that spear, huh? So instead of everyone fighting, they said, "Let's just have one man from each army determine who wins." What do you think the Israelites thought of that?
How about everybody on our side, but I want them on our side.
It's like most of the Israelites, I don't know. I doubt there's any Israelites that were tall, even as tall as Moses. Who knows? Maybe there were, but they remember when they came into the land. They came in from Egypt, and they said, "We're just like grasshoppers compared to the people that live here." So there were tall people back then. Okay, verse 11. On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. I think I would be too. I might soil myself. Who knows? Tallest person in Israel might have been King Saul. He might have been Moses' size, because he was a head above everybody else, it said. And he could still probably walk through that doorway without any problem. If Israel was going to have a champion, Israel's champion would be much smaller than Goliath. 12. Now David was the son of an Ephraimite named Jesse, who was from Bethlehem in Judah. Jesse had 8 sons, and in Saul's time he was very old. Jesse's 3 oldest sons had followed Saul into the war. The firstborn was Eliab, the second Abinadab, and the third Shammah. David was the youngest. The 3 oldest followed Saul, but David went back and forth from Saul to tend his father's sheep at Bethlehem. For 40 days the Philistine came forward every morning and evening and took his stand. So 40 days, this guy came out and dared them to send a champion. They all just shrank back whenever that guy came out. This kept making them, imagine 40 days of this, how that would make you feel. You're starting to feel really confident, and it's like ready to give up, or try and figure out your way around so you don't have to get in trouble. There's no match. They figured they were no match for the Philistines if this guy was a representative. Now Jesse said to his son David, "Take this ephah of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread for your brothers, and hurry to their camp. Take along these 10 cheeses to the commander of their unit. See how your brothers are, and bring back some assurance from them." They're with Saul and all the men of Israel in the valley of Elah, fighting against the Philistines. So early in the morning, David left the flock in care of a shepherd, loaded up, and set out as Jesse had directed. Now, from what we can tell, Bethlehem, which is where David was about 15 miles away from the valley of Ephah. And so on foot, it's going to take you about a day to get there. So it says, in fact, he reached the camp as the army was going out to its battle positions. That would be in the morning. They were going out shouting the war cry. Israel and the Philistines were drawing up their lines facing each other. David left his things, all the stuff that he brought, the supplies, with the keeper of supplies, and ran to the battle line and asked his brothers how they were. As he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, stepped out from his lines and shouted his normal defiance. And David heard it. Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him in great fear. Duh. Now the Israelites had been saying, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He'll also give him his daughter in marriage, and will exempt his family from taxes in Israel." You kids probably don't know this, but if your parents heard something about exemption from taxes, they'd be really interested. But anyway, it was a big reward. And 40 days, and nobody had taken the king up on it. Why do you suppose that was? They probably, they didn't want to risk their life. They knew they were going to be unable to collect the reward, weren't they? Right. So David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills the Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God?" They repeated to him what they had been saying and told him, "This is what will be done for that man who kills him." Well, when Eliab, David's older brother, heard him speaking with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." "Now what have I done?" said David. "Can't I even speak?" He turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter, and the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Now we know from the previous chapter that Eliab was taller than David was. He was pretty tall and like when doing what God calls you to do. Eliab was also older than David. Well, he was his older brother, right? Duh. And he had more experience. Anyway, back to David in front of Saul. Saul replied, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth." But David said to Saul, "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, your servant killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." Saul said to David, "Go, and the Lord be with you." How big is a lion? A lion that tall? No. A bear. Bears aren't even that tall. Even a grizzly bear, I think you'd have to reach up to be that tall. That's pretty big. David didn't know. He thought just because he killed these things, to be able to kill a lot, but I guess he must have had faith or something, huh? Why would David go out there when he knew that all Goliath had to do was throw that spear that weighed like this at him and he'd be a goner? That sounds pretty dumb, doesn't it? Sort of. But as Saul said, "Go and the Lord be with you." Then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. Saul should have been the one going out there and fighting, right? Because he was taller than everybody else. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he wasn't used to them. He said, "I can't go in these because I'm not used to them." So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from that stream that we had up there, and put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. The Philistine with a big sword or rod. So I don't know, that tip looks pretty small, but maybe maybe the real one was bigger than that, or maybe it's just heavy. But a sword, a spear, and he had a shield bearer to hold his shield in front of him. His armor weighed about 125 pounds from what we can tell. Just wearing that piece of armor, probably like he could have had 3 or 4 of you on him, and when he was going out to battle, and because you weigh, I don't know how many of you they can put together to make 100 pounds, but big guy. And David, how much armor did he have on? None. Well, see if Goliath bothers to throw the spear at him. Meanwhile, the Philistine, with his shield bearer in front of him, kept coming closer to David. He looked at David and saw he was little more than a boy, ruddy and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." You leave a dead body out, and that's what happens. The birds and the wild animals come and eat it, along with all the worms and all the other stuff too, right? That's what he was saying he was going to do to David. So this picture here, if you remember what I said about the description of David, and you know what the word means, this picture does not show David accurately. You know what's wrong with that? Take a look at the color of his hair there. In the picture it's black, but it says in Scripture that he was ruddy. He was red, kind of like Esau. He was a red-headed guy. From what we can tell, that's what it means when it says ruddy. Is he left-handed? Probably the picture should be reversed then, huh? Yeah, so a couple of things. But when you look at an artist picture, it's good for getting an idea, but always remember artists weren't there, so they don't know how it exactly looks. And that's how you get tricked into stuff in school, but I won't go into that. So anyway, here we have...
It says he got a staff in one arm, and then later on it says, Goliath said that send a man out with sticks, plural. So it's likely that he didn't even have a sling like that. It's likely that he had a staff sling, which it would have been a sling on the end of the staff. He would have just taken a staff and swung it, and the stone would come out. And if you look at do the research on a staff sling, the stone comes out, I think, about 10 times faster and stronger than that type of sling. And so that's why it was so much stronger to penetrate the Goliath. But
Well, whatever it was, we don't know because we weren't there, right? And that's problem with looking at the past. All we can deal with is what exactly it says in the text. And so we have to just in our mind's eye figure it out, but then be ready to understand better if the scripture tells us something different. Anyway, so David said to the Philistine, "You come against me with sword and spear and javelin. But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and wild animals, and the whole world will know that there's a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it's not by the sword or the spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." I don't think he was saying it would be by the sling either. I think it was the power of God. As the Philistines moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone. Without a sword in his hand, he struck down the Philistines and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword, imagine how big that sucker was, and drew it from its sheath. After he had killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. What made David a champion? Was it his size or his strength or his battle experience? It was his faith in God. That was in his heart, right? His faith in his heart. That's what did it. You think you can be a champion like that if you have that faith in your heart? Not what's on the outside. God looks at the heart to find his champions. His champions believe that he, God, will win their battles, no matter how big the enemy is. Sometimes the enemy is inside of us, but God can still defeat it. Real champions don't stop believing, no matter how big the giant is, no matter how hard things get. Real champions don't stop believing. Some people stop believing. Imagine some of those guys that went out to war figured, well, we can win this, until they saw the Goliath, and then, I'm not so sure about that. But real champions believe that God will win the battle for them. So here's a lesson, here's a verse from today's lesson for you to memorize. I got it in two versions. Your dad can tell you which version that he wants you to memorize it in, but the way that I read it, the Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. It'll help you remember that you too can be a champion if you trust God. All right.